Hey, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to go over the most viral comps right now in patch 14.17b. More viral than Sony's new hit game Concord. Just kidding, it was not a hit at all, which is kind of what the tier list is. Because not too much has changed, even though there was like a slight B patch. It was just bug fixes, so nothing really crazy happened, but there were some important changes you probably need to know about. There are actually a couple of 4-cost comps that snuck in, but it's mainly a reroll meta, not gonna deny that. I know some people, they're just forcing reroll like in maybe 70-80% of their games. One of my friends actually told me this funny story where he taught someone how to play TFT 2 weeks ago and they hit masters only playing Kogmaw and Ahri. That's how good reroll is right now, but of course in the S tier we have all the hero augments at the top. Spider Queen Elise, High Horsepower Lillia, Witchy Wallop Poppy, and Zap Attack Blitzcrank. And then for the best 4-cost comp that has a requirement, I'd say that would be Portal Ryze. 8 Portal with the Portal Spatula is just really easy to play, and as long as your items aren't complete garbage, you're gonna be more than good to go. For a little bit more flexible 4-cost comps though, we have Karma Gwen Fiora combo. That one used to be one of my most played comps. Horizontal Kalista and Arcana Ryze. These 3 comps are pretty good options if you do not get any hero augments, don't get a spatula, and let's say the reroll comp you wanted to go for is going to be a bit contested. These are the 3 comps I would kind of aim for instead if you're doing like a level 8 comp. But after that, in the A tier, we have the Kogmaw reroll comp and the Ahri reroll comp that I was talking about. Both very powerful stuff. The only issue is that you can only play this if you are uncontested. If there's someone else playing it, it's gonna be a bit of a struggle. So just make sure you scout a bit first before you play these reroll comps. That's why, even though they're very good, I put them in the A tier, not the S tier. Same thing for Veigar. If you're contested, you're not gonna hit 3 stars and it's gonna be really difficult to win with a 2-star Veigar. But if you get everything, it's like holy Hawk Tua, and he just kills everything and Vex tanks everything. Katarina Reroll is gonna be the next comp up. This one, I wouldn't really consider it a reroll comp. We'll talk more about that later. It's just like a warrior comp, and if you happen to get Katarina 3, great. If not, Fiora and Gwen are a great combo. Spin to win Wukong, it's another hero augment. It shows up pretty rarely, I'd say, and you need perfect items for it. That's why it's a bit lower on the tier list. Warwick reroll, you need the specific Ornn item with it. Very difficult to get, but super powerful when you do. It's actually averaging a 3.5 as an item combo together right now. But again, super rare. After that, we have Shapeshifter Flex, Ashe Jax Reroll, Sweet Tooth Nunu, Sugarcraft, Frost Pyro Olaf, Pyro Varus, Built Different, Molten Caramel Rumble, Deja Vu Galio, and then Multistriker Kalista. I'm gonna make a couple exceptions in the B tier right now, some special mentions, and that's gonna be the Fast 9 comp and the Witchcraft Fiora comp. So if you ever get to 8 Witchcraft, it's really good. 2.81, right? But like, it's hard to get 2 spatulas specifically, but the thing is, 6 Witchcraft is complete garbage. 4.75, no thanks. 4.59 for 4 Witchcraft, also no thanks. But unlike the other really far reach comps where you need 2 spatulas to get the trait activated, 8 is much easier to get than 9 or 10. So obviously like 10 Eldritch, 10 Portal is super duper strong, right? But like, so is 9 Mage, 9 Frost, and 9 Faerie. The thing is, it's really difficult to get to level 9 and level 10, whereas getting to 8 is pretty manageable. That's why I wanted to do the special mention to 8 Witchcraft, because if you do just get the spats randomly, you will do well with it. Fast 9ing also I think is situational. Like if you do it on a really good portal for it, you're gonna be doing perfectly fine. But if the stars do not align, then yeah, it's gonna suck. But everything else in the B tier, there are generally better options to go for. Like for some of these reroll comps, there are better rerolls to go for within their same cost. If there's like a different carry like Faerie Kalista, there are much better Kalista comps. There's like both the horizontal Kalista and Multistriker Kalista comp that you should play instead. So that's kind of why the B tier is the B tier, but why I also want to mention Fast 9 and Karma. So let's go into how to play each and every one of these comps. We're going to start off with Spider Elise, just as a refresher. And there are timestamps in this video, so if you already saw one of these comps from the previous week, you can just go ahead and skip to the one that you want to actually learn more about. Or you could also head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta, where we update this every single week. But Elise is just a sick shapeshifter build. It's still the best augment, 3.69. I think last week it was 3.7. I forgot what I said in that other video. So nothing's really changed. You just play 6 Shapeshifter, add in a random carry. Most people like to do blasters. We'll look at the Shapeshifter comp later for that. So either Varus or Smolder are going to be perfect carries to kind of complement her. But this is pretty much an auto take augment. Normally I say with the hero augments like, oh, you should have like 3 copies of it. Like for the Blitzcrank augment, Zap Attack, I'd like to either have 3 Blitzcranks and okay items on my bench, or very good items and maybe like 2 Blitzcranks on my bench. I don't think it's quite as auto take as Spider Queen Elise, but this one is pretty much auto take. She pretty much uses any item component, like anything except for bow builds one of these items or builds a usable item. And also another thing about Elise is that she doesn't need perfect items, but it's a very simple build. Just do 1 cost reroll for that. Same with high horsepower Lillia. There are a couple of different options here though. You could do the Ahri Reroll build, which is very strong. So as you're rolling for your Lillia 3-star, if you manage to hit a bunch of Ahris, go for Ahri. But if you don't get that, you could go for Kalista over here. So people right now are more often playing the Kalista build. The reason why is because getting a lot of Ahris is kind of difficult. You also want perfect items on your Ahri, but Kalista is definitely easier to play. So what you can do, remember how I said bows were kind of useless in these comps? Well, with the Kalista build, you are able to use all those bows. Rage Blade's really nice, and you could put that on like a Tristana in the early game. That way you get the Faerie buff, and Rage Blade Tristana is just a really good combo in general. And then after you hit Kalista 3-star, you level up, play 3 Multistriker. People like adding in Hecarim and Akali, Hecarim being a Bastion himself. Akali giving you Pyro, pretty decent attack speed buff. And then of course, main carry in Kalista. After you get a Rage Blade, red buff is incredibly good. She hits like a small AoE with her ability. I think she targets 3 people. And then adding a Last Whisper isn't a bad idea. For items on Lillia, if you do the Ahri build, you focus more on your Ahri items. So I like getting like a Ionic Spark on my Lillia, and then just any tank item plus a BT. But if you're doing the Kalista version, you rely a bit more on your Lillia. So you definitely want to put the crown on her along with Bloodthirster and Archangel Staff. Other item combinations do work in the second version down here, but this item combo is by far the most popular. But since this hero augment is so deadly in the early parts of the game, I like just building whatever on her unless I have a specific component and can slam something else. For example, if you had a bow, a chain, and a rod, like yeah, you could kind of greed an item and ideally try to get the Archangel Staff with the rod. But if you build a Crown Guard on your Lillia and save the bow for whoever you're putting in your backline, Tristana into Kalista, it's going to be more than fine. On the other hand, if I have a sword, a rod, and a glove, I might not build any items. I might want to greed for the Bloodthirster and then build the Archangel Staff. But overall, pretty simple to play comp. It's just one of the hero augment stuff. Same with the Witchy Wallop Poppy. So of course with Witchy Wallop Poppy, you could do the same Ahri nonsense you saw before, but instead of AP items on your Lillia, you put AD items on your Poppy. If you don't get that, a lot of people have been doing this 6 Witchcraft build. I don't think it's as strong, but it's still very solid. It's really good because Fiora is good. Fiora doesn't really need much help to get her going, so some people don't even run warriors with her, but you essentially run Poppy as your main carry with Fiora and Ryze as your backup dancers. So Ryze is going to be a great applier of like a Morello or red buff. He does hit fewer targets now, but he's still pretty solid. You could also put like Archangel Staff on him and have him stack up throughout the fight and win the later portions of it. And then of course Fiora is going to be jumping around to the backline and hitting good stuff. I'm not going to put too many item recommendations on Fiora and Ryze though in this situation because your main focus is going to be on the Poppy items. Sterix and Bloodthirster are pretty much mandatory, but the good news is that the third item doesn't really matter too much. It could essentially be a damage item, another healing item. I've even seen tank items work a little bit, but pretty much any item that you'd normally build on Fiora, it'll probably fit on the Poppy. But to play this comp, you just get the Witchy Wallop Augment, do a 1 cost reroll, and then level up, play the 4 cost, or play the Ahri reroll if you get a ton of Ahris. Next one up, and I promise this is the last hero augment for a while, right? Yeah, we have Portal Ryze next. It's going to be the Zap Attack Blitzcrank. The 2 versions here is going to be the Veigar version or the Kogmaw version. I've even seen Ziggs work. I'm not even trolling with that one. Ziggs is pretty decent in the early game, so if you get him, go for him. If not, go for Veigar, because I think Veigar is a lot better. And of course, the Kogmaw build is very, very solid too. Kogmaw is also really easy to play, which is why I think most people prefer the bottom version down here, but it really depends on what items you get. So on your Blitzcrank, you want to build all the regular tank items. So like Stoneplate, Crown Guard, Redemption, Warmogs, Ionic Spark, like all these items work really well on him. There are more that work too. It's not just those items. But then if you get AP items, go for the Veigar. If you get AD items, go for the Kogmaw. That's really all there is to it. If you do play the bottom version, I do recommend getting item augments though, because if you manage to get Blitzcrank 3, Kogmaw, Tristana, maybe even Nunu 3 sometimes, you end up having a lot of strong units. So if you don't have items on them, it's kind of a waste. Compare that to the top comp up here where you really just care about Blitzcrank and Veigar. You don't need as many items. So you'd rather take something like a combat augment or an econ augment to hit Veigar 3-star. But again, we don't get to choose which version we get to play in each game of TFT. We kind of have to play what we're given. So do keep that in mind whenever you're kind of going for this. But similar patterns to how you play the Ahri comp, you just go for 1-cost reroll, and then whatever items you're getting, just hard force one of the other 2 things. And you don't need to hit the 3 stars of the other stuff. I mean, like, if it's super late game, yeah, you need to, but the Blitzcrank should carry you through a lot of the mid game that oftentimes you just get top 4 without completely needing everything in the back. If you don't believe me, here's how 3-star Blitzcrank does with a 2-star Kogmaw and a 2-star Veigar. It's still doing 4.64, which is obviously really, really good, considering you did not 3-star your damage dealer. If you do, like Kogmaw, it goes to 3.74. If we go to Veigar, it goes to 3.23. So that's a trade I'm willing to take in a lot of cases. And if your attention span is too weak to listen to everything I said about all the hero augments, so enough of that stuff. I'm kind of getting brain rot from just talking about them, but let's go into the Portal Ryze build. So this is one of my go-to 4-cost comps if I get a spatula. It's probably the best spatula comp. Maybe Sugarcraft can compete with it, but the thing with Sugarcraft is I like to stack it early. I also like to play it if I get like a 5 item component drop at the start of the game, or if I'm on like item anvil or whatever portal that gives extra items. So if you're looking for consistency, if you do get a spatula like Portal Ryze, there's not much that can compete with it. There's so many different units you could throw the portal spatula on. In this picture alone, we have 4, and this is just 4 costs and 5 costs. For 2 costs and 3 costs in the mid game, there are tons of options too, so there's a lot you can do with this comp. The reason why is because you have so many good traits to play around. You have 3 tank traits in Shapeshifter, Bastion, and Vanguard. You have mages if you get Nora and Galio. And guess what Portal Spatula is really good on? It's really good on tanks because Portal gives a big shield to all the Portal units. Itemization can be a bit tricky though. So what people like to do is get a combination of attack speed, anti-heal, and ability power on Ryze. So the best item for him is going to be red buff by far, but Morello's also good. And then after that, just go full AP. Rageblade's also good. Spear Shojin is playable, but I think people have been finding the most success with AP builds. After that, for your main tank, you want to make it either Taric or whoever you're using your Portal Spatula on. So like Nasus, great user of that. Diana, Morgana, whoever it is. Tom Kench works too. He's not in this picture. But if you do end up getting Nora, you generally want to play the Nami instead. And then in those cases, you want to put some mana items onto your Nami. However, most games you don't normally get the Nora because it's a 5 cost and you can't really get specific 5 costs. So generally I'm flexing some random tank in the front line. But that's really all there is to it. You want to do a fast 8 for this comp. Sometimes people like to roll on level 6 to get a couple of the early game upgrades like Galio, Kassadin, Ezreal are really easy to start up at that point in the game. Oftentimes you're running a Rumble because you get Blaster and Vanguard early on. So some people can roll a little bit at 6, but most times I see people do a fast 8 with this build. And when I say roll, I mean maybe like roll 10 gold tops because you really need to hit level 8 to get your Ryze because it is a pretty expensive comp. But again, pretty easy. All the requirements are over here. Let's go on into the next build, which is Flex, Karma, Fiora, and Gwen, which is something we didn't really talk too much about in the past video. So in this one, the most popular version is going to be with Preservers. People really like the Rakan Morgana combo up front, but obviously we don't get Morgana every single game. So alternative boards you could play to this is you could take out Milio, you could take out Cassio. They're not really that mandatory in the comp. And then after that, you could drop in stuff like Nasus plus Nico. This gives you the Witchcraft for Fiora and gives you Shapeshifter. It gives you like a couple of options for different types of tanks. And sometimes if you don't have the Fiora, you could play Olaf instead and use Olaf as an item holder for her. And since you're doing that, you could trade out Nasus or Nico for like a Swain. And hopefully this will keep you alive enough to get into the main comp. But obviously, ideally, you just hit whatever you see here. But there are many ways to kind of get to the same result. The path I just showed there was just one example. There are many other different ways to kind of get to this state. But as with most Fast 8 comps, you really want a strong early game to kind of get there. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking, oh, if I lose streak, that means I should Fast 8. Does not work that way. One of the biggest beginner mistakes is trying to do that. Typically, when you lose streak, what you want to do is do some sort of reroll comp. The reason why is because you can stabilize in stage 3 without sacrificing your whole game. Whereas if you tried to Fast 8, you'd lose 10 rounds in the game, 5 in stage 2, 5 in stage 3, and you're pretty much going to have no life left. You also have to keep in mind that you are not guaranteed to hit everything, so you might not even win after you hit level 8. So that's why you really only want to play Fast 8 when you have a strong early game, or if you have like the biggest economy in the world, because it's really just not that feasible otherwise. The good news is about this comp is that pretty much any item you get can be used. Tank items can go on Rakan, AD items Fiora, AP items Gwen and Karma. So another thing that you do want for this comp is going to be a lot of items, assuming you kind of 2-star everything. There are also a lot of different versions of this comp. Notice how I say this is a Flex, Karma, Fiora, Gwen build. Sometimes you don't play Gwen, sometimes you play like a Witchcraft build. I've seen some builds where you don't even play the Karma. You really just kind of play whatever you hit and kind of just roll with it. It makes it a bit more difficult than some of the other comps we looked at before, like the Portal comp. You pretty much run the same comp every time and then you flex one unit. And then we have the reroll comps where you just like make one decision. If you get AP items, go for the Veigar. If you get AD items, go for the Kogmaw. But for flex comps like this one and the next 2 comps we'll be looking at, it's a little bit trickier. So if you are a beginner to TFT, I recommend not playing any of the flex comps and probably try to stick to some of the more rigid comps. Like for example, again, like my friend taught someone how to play TFT and in 2 weeks he hit masters by only playing 2 reroll comps. But the next comp up we have is going to be Horizontal Kalista. This is another flex build. This one is with Preservers, but you could play Kalista with Bastions, you could play Kalista with all sorts of different frontline, but this one's going to be the most popular. Preservers are good because you get to splash in a lot of random traits. For example, you get Faerie from Rakan, you get Witchcraft from Morgana, and you get Chrono from Zilean, but the build you see here is mainly used when you do get the legendaries. If you do not have the legendaries, you could still play like a solid comp. It would just look a little bit different. So let's say you don't have Morgana, you don't have Camille, what should you run instead? Oftentimes people pair it up with the Hecarim for the Multistriker and then adding in a Shen for a Bastion, and you also get more Pyro that way. Like let's say you don't have like the Nico, sometimes you don't have the Nasus, and it kind of looks something like this. Sometimes you could add stuff like Arcana with the Tahm Kench, and let's say you don't hit the Rakan. Well, instead of the Rakan, sometimes you could run Tristana or Lillia in order to get the Faerie for your Kalista, as both those units give decent bonuses. With Lillia, you get a Bastion, so you could drop one of the other Bastions. And then with Tristana, you could kind of put it next to your Kalista, and sometimes if they ever have like a unit that jumps to your Kalista, Tristana can oftentimes knock them out. There are also mixed builds where you go for a Kalista plus Varus carry, which makes Tristana pretty useful in those situations because you get blastered this way. So again, sometimes the front line's pretty variable, but even the back line can be too. Kind of goes in with my point of how these comps are a bit more difficult to play, because there's a lot more freedom in what you can do. But really, the only requirement you have for this comp is going to be the Rage Blade on the Kalista. If you're not running 7 Multistriker, Kalista needs the Rage Blade. But apart from that, like every other item in this comp can kind of be whatever you want, within reason. But overall, this is a pretty solid build. It's just a little difficult to pull off. Maybe I do a video to go over these comps in a bit more detail. Next up we have is the Ryze Flex build. The most popular version right now is going to be the 4 Arcana build, but some people also go for 4 Scholar. It really depends on what you hit. Like sometimes you hit the Xerath, you hit the Nora, but then other times you hit the Milio. Really, none of this matters unless you get the 2-star Ryze, of course. But it kind of gives you more options to play different things. So Taric belongs in both versions of the comp, but sometimes you hit the Nasus and Rakan. Sometimes you hit like the Tahm Kench and Nami. So depending on what you do get in the game, you're going to be switching up your build a little bit. Luckily, the items for Ryze remain the same in both versions. It's just like the same combo as before. Anti-heal, attack speed, and AP. Some people like building the Rage Blade. I like building it too. The Rage Blade is nice because you can flex it with a Kalista build, but I will say that a Rage Blade is a bit worse than these other items you see here on Ryze. Oftentimes though, when you're building Rage Blade in the early game, it's more for just like the slamming value, not so much because you're trying to build perfect items for your late game comp. I will make one special note though. People like to do Arcana on their Tahm Kench in the Arcana build. I notice a lot of other guides out there, they just show what units are on the board, but they don't tell you what to Arcana, so hopefully this helps you out a little bit. And in the super late game, I have seen people move their Arcana over to their Xerath, but most of the time it's going to be on your Tahm Kench. But same rules apply to this comp as it did for the previous two comps. You have to be able to flex around a lot of the different builds, and you also have to have decent HP to actually do a fast 8 with. I guess the alternative is having an Econ augment. That way you hit 8 a little bit earlier or with more gold so that you are able to hit everything. But that's going to round out the S tiers for now. Let's move on into the A tiers. We're going to look at the Kogmaw build first. So there are some versions where the people go like Jinx with Wukong. That build's very, very good. Little expensive for my taste and very item dependent. Wukong really needs as many stone plates as he can get. I recommend at least 2. And then Jinx needs Rageblade and Runon. So the Jinx build is the strongest version of all the Hunter reroll builds, but it's the most item dependent. The more common approach is just going to be doing a Kogmaw build like you see in the middle image over here. And you pretty much just put tank items on either Rumble or Nunu, depending on who you 3-star. And then you go Shojin red buff plus 3rd item on Kogmaw, and then a Rageblade on Tristana plus any other random item. If you do manage to get Jinx, you can itemize her up as well. Sometimes you get her before some of the 2-cost units, even though you're not really trying for it. But this is just going to be a 2-cost reroll build, so what you want to do is level up to level 6 on stage 3-2, roll down a little bit to stabilize, hit the 2-star like a 2-star Nunu, 2-star Kogmaw. And then after that, you want to econ back up, roll down everything on like stage 4-2, and ideally hit everything 3-star. It is a pretty hit or miss build, but very strong nonetheless. Again, you don't really want to be playing this reroll comp if you are contested, because you probably won't hit the 3-star, or maybe you just hit 1 of them instead of 2 or 3 of them, and it makes the comp a lot weaker for obvious reasons. But there are a ton of people playing this comp a lot across all ratings. If you want to watch someone play it, I recommend watching Kyun. He's like one of the best reroll players in TFT because he's just been like a reroll guru since like set 3. I don't know how he does it, but most of his games he's playing rerolls. He had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in a row, all reroll. And I'm pretty sure if you look deep into his match history, it's like just a lot of reroll in general. He's just really good at that playstyle. But it is pretty simple to build. A lot of my friends say they fall asleep when they play this because you just do the same thing every time and it's not that complicated. Next comp up we have is going to be the Ahri Reroll. 2 versions for this also. There's the Bastion version and then there's the Vanguard version. It really depends on what you're hitting in the early game. A lot of people, they see a lot of 1 cost early on, in which case you should go for Lillia 3, Poppy 3, and then just put tank items on whoever you 3-star. You really just need 1 of them at 3-star. And then if you don't get any copies of them, you go for the Vanguards instead, where you go for all the 2-cost 3-stars. Galio, Rumble, and Ahri. Ahri just builds the same thing every time. It's just going to be the Adaptive Helm ×2 plus either Hat or Jeweled Gauntlet. A couple of other items work as well, but these 2 combos are by far the best. And then after that, I like focusing on tank items. Sometimes you do a secondary carry. The secondary carry can either be Zoe 3-star or Ryze. So if you do get Zoe 3, it's not a waste of money. Just throw leftover items on her. And if you don't get that, just throw everything on Ryze. Another thing to note with this build is on Carousel, you want to be taking as many tiers as possible because you can never have enough of them. Obviously, you need them for the adaptive helms on Ahri. If you get the Zoe, blue buff is great. In worst case scenario, you could build like an Archangels, you know? Or tank items on some of your tanks such as Redemption or Protector's Vow, or even an adaptive helm in the front line too. But depending on which comp you go for, you want to do a 1 or 2 cost reroll. You just have to be a bit careful and see if you're contested. So scout around, see if anyone slammed adaptive helm in the early game, and if they did, you might have to compete with them. Next build up we have is going to be Reroll Veigar. This one's probably my favorite reroll build of the patch just because I think Veigar's so fun. If you get the blue buff Nasher plus Shojin build, he just keeps autoing and ulting non-stop and it's really funny to look at. And I also think it's really funny that he doesn't have a single rod item on him with this build, even though he's like a mage. You'd think mages want a lot of AP, and don't get me wrong, AP is very good on Veigar. I'd say the only 2 mandatory items are going to be the blue buff plus the Nasher's Tooth. Shojin is like extra. You could replace that with almost anything, like Jeweled Gauntlet, Hat, whatever you want. Luckily, you could use the rods on the other champions on your team. You could build like a Morello on Nami, you could build Crown Guard or Ionic Spark on Vex. All you really have to make sure to do is you have a lot of Veigars, or you get perfect items from him in the early game, and you have to have a big enough econ to actually hit everything. Lastly, you want some sort of magic shred, so Ionic Spark is really good. One of Vex's best items, to be honest. But if you don't get that, you could always put a static shiv on someone in the backline, preferably something like Nami. But you really just run 5 mage for this build. Instead of Nora, you could run Soraka or Seraphine, and that's really all there is to it. Just 5 mage. A lot of people make the mistake in running Honeymancy, but you don't really need to dip into that for Veigar to carry. So to play this comp, you want to stabilize at one of 2 stages. So the first time you could do it is level 6 at stage 3-2. If you have pairs of Veigar and Vex already, you could just roll down at level 6 at this point here. I know level 6 is not optimal for getting 3 cost units. Level 7 is the best time to do it, but leveling up to level 7 on stage 3-2 is very expensive. So sometimes you can just roll on level 6 to hit them 2-star if you have the pairs of them. If you do not have the pairs of them, what you can do instead is level up on stage 3-5 to level 7 and roll down there. You can even roll to 0 in order to hit Vex 2-star and Veigar 2-star. Maybe you get like a Nami 1-star at that point. But then after that, of course, you econ all the way back up and then roll to 50 every single turn until you hit. You probably want to all in either at stage 4-5 or 5-1, because that's generally when people want to hit 3-star 3 costs. The timing of that is going to depend on what type of portals you got. If you got no econ portals or no econ augments, I recommend not playing this comp to begin with. But if that's the case, you're going to be hitting 3-star Veigar and Vex really late. But if you did get a bunch of them, maybe you even hit it on stage 4-5. Pretty easy comp to play though, you just can't play it while contested. Next comp up we have is Katarina Reroll. This comp is a little more interesting than everything else we've seen so far because the reroll is optional. Generally, you decide during the game whether you can go for 3-star Katarina or just go for a 4 or 6 warrior build, focusing on Fiora and Gwen. If you haven't noticed yet, Fiora and Gwen is just such a deadly combo. You could pretty much play these two with any other units in the game. And in this case, it just happens to be running it with a Katarina that you can sometimes 3-star. Katarina's pretty easy to 3-star because most people don't even play this unit as a complementary unit because no one's playing fairies and the people who are playing warriors are just playing 2 warrior. So that's why you're able to 3-star Katarina pretty often compared to some of the other comps you saw. Like one of my friends was playing Reroll Veigar earlier today and I was watching the game and he couldn't hit Veigar 3 because some Zap Attack guy was going for it even though he had no Veigar items. Like some people who are just playing Honeymancers just take the Veigars, whereas I promise you no one is taking a Katarina. So for this build, you want to do either a 3-cost reroll or a fast 8 depending on what version you're playing. If you get a bunch of econ, I do recommend going for the 3-star Katarina, but if you're a bit poor, just do the regular fast 8 and go for Fiora and Gwen instead. The most important thing to do whenever you're playing this build though is slamming a lot of items. The reason why you need to slam items early in this build is because Katarina, Fiora, and Gwen are all very flexible in their items. They're not that picky. So you could literally slap anything on them and be good to go. Some people say a healing item is mandatory on them. I don't even think that part's that true. Like obviously it's good, but warriors have built-in healing. So if you don't have one, it's not the end of the world. So literally just slam all the bruiser items and eventually there will be some use for it. I promise you that. But this build really comes to life if you are able to get a warrior emblem through one of the augments. But it is a little rare because warrior is not a craftable emblem at this point in the game. So most games you are just going to be playing for warrior. Next build up we have is going to be Spin to Win Wukong. This one's just like the Wukong Jinx build. Very powerful stuff, but pretty item dependent, and you also need to be a little rich because it's a 3-cost reroll. But if you ever get Stoneplate plus 2 bruiser items on Wukong, such as BT and Sterix Gauge, he just does the same thing as other 3-star Wukongs, except he does a lot more other stuff. And of course, when you combine that with Jinx, Jinx with Runons is incredible because she gets a bonus whenever she gets a takedown. It's just a very natural way to kind of build around the Spin to Win comp. The most popular way to play Spin to Win is going to be with Preservers, but if you don't want to do the Hunter version, some people do it with like Arcana also, and you could also do like Karma carry in the back if you get AP items instead of AD items. But decently simple comp, nothing too complicated, just another hero augment nonsense. Corrupt Vampiric Scepter Warwick, I have not had the opportunity to like play this in a while, but as you saw in the data before, if you just get this item combo on Warwick, just go for it. 7 Frost or 6 Vanguard, both versions are going to be fine. They're honestly about the same performance-wise, and it pretty much doesn't matter what you do as long as you get 3-star Warwick plus the item. Even the other 2 items Warwick holds doesn't matter that much. Like you could build Rage Blade, Quicksilver, Titan's Resolve, Sterex, Edge of Night. So many things work on this, it's almost crazy. But I just wouldn't attempt this without Corrupted Scepter. So we're not going to spend too much time on this because most of us watching this video will not get the opportunity to play that comp in this patch. Next one up we have is Shapeshifter Flex. This one's just a 6 Shapeshifter build. It's very similar to what we saw with the Elise Spider Queen build. You just throw in some carry in the back such as Smolder or Varus. And ideally, if you get Briar, that's like the kind of sign to go for this. In this picture, I do have the Shapeshifter spat out, so we do have 8 Shapeshifter. But 6 is like decent if you are able to get the Briar early. But this one, you just want to do standard leveling pattern. You could stabilize a bit early on to try to get Nico 2, Swain 2, Shyvana 2 early on and some form of carry. You could use like anything in the back line. Pretty much if a unit is range and 2 or 3 costs, you could use that in the mid game before you get Varus and Smolder. But I'd say this comp is pretty situational, even though it is a flex build, because oftentimes you do need to find like an early Briar. Oftentimes if I do have a Shapeshifter start, sometimes I just pivot out of it if I don't get the Briar, because honestly the items can fit on so many other units. But if you do get like an early Shapeshifter crest, or if you took Eternal Growth, then you kind of have to do something like this. But Varus or Smolder as the carries, whoever you kind of get to 2-star. Next one up we have is going to be the Ashe and Jax Reroll. This one is like a really fun comp to play and is really, really powerful in the early game. The only trouble is trying to like keep it going for as long as possible. And that isn't really possible unless you have like Press the Attack or like a Multistriker emblem. Because some games you don't get Camille, some games you spend too much money trying to get the 3-star Ashe and Jax, and other times other people are just high rolling a bit too much. But in most of the other cases, this comp is pretty solid. You will generally just kind of hit everything, win streak for a bit, and then slowly bleed out. But the times this can work really, really well is if you are able to get to 7 Multistriker really quickly, maybe even get a 2-star Camille because you kind of win streak throughout the mid game. But I would kind of only go for this comp if I have a ton of Ashes and Jaxes, because rolling for these 2 bozos is like much more difficult to do compared to the hero augments, because you don't get 3 copies of them for free. So just keep that in mind when you are playing this. It is an easy comp to do. You just do 1-cost reroll, and if you get AD items, put them on Ashe. If you get tank items, put them on Jax. And if you get AP items, you could even do something on Kassadin. I have also seen this build work out with 3-star Hecarim. Sometimes you just get it randomly. So if you are leveling up and seeing a lot of them, it's another thing to kind of consider. You do have to keep in mind, most people just play Hecarim for fun in their team comps because he is a triple trait unit. He is a Bastion, Arcana, and Multistriker. And most people just splash Arcana in their comps anyways. So you have to really be careful before trying to commit to a Hecarim build. But next build up we have is going to be Sweet Tooth Nunu, 2-cost reroll, hero comp augment, nothing too complicated. The 2 builds for this one is going to be the Veigar build and the Kogmaw build. I think the Veigar build is a bit more powerful, but Kogmaw build a little bit more consistent. So just click this Kogmaw Jinx reroll button if you want to see the Kogmaw Jinx build. But you really just want to focus on Nunu items. Just BT Warmogs plus any 3rd item, more than good to go there. Next one up we have is going to be Sugarcraft. If you have Sugarcraft spatula at the start of the game, that's the only time I would do this. Put it on Fiora. She completely smurfs with it. It just gives a bunch of like, I think AD and AP. And any comp with Fiora plus Gwen is going to do well on this patch. But of course, if you get a nice Sugarcraft cash out, it's going to be even better. But it's really hard to reach 6 Sugarcraft because 1, you need the Gwen, and getting a 4-cost unit is a bit difficult in the early parts of the game, and 2, you need the spatula. So only do this if you get the spatula. Don't even try it otherwise. I also like doing it if I'm on a portal, which gives a lot of items, because it just makes it much easier to stack everything. But once you do, the comp's pretty self-explanatory. And another thing to note, you always get a golden remover. So just slam items as early as possible, because that's really how you get this comp to stack up. But next comp up we have is going to be Frostfire, Olaf, and Varus. Varus is kind of on the lower end of the A tier, but if you do get a Pyro or Frostbat, you could go for like 7 or 9 Frost, or something like a 5 Pyro. Play Varus, Nasus, and Olaf as your core, and then complement it with like a Swain and a Hui. If you ever get a lot of spatulas, that's really where this build kind of shines, because you can go for either Frost or Pyro to finish it off, and all the units make very good use of the emblem. For example, if you get a Frost one, just put it on Varus. He just gets a ton of stats, which is exactly what you want. It's pretty much like building a Deathblade on him. And then if you get a Pyro Spat, drop it on your Olaf, drop it on your Hui, drop it on your Diana, whoever you have itemized as your carry. And I mean, the execute on a damage unit, it doesn't really matter who you put it on. Some people might be wondering why Olaf's in the back row. Sometimes he jumps up to the front and he gets a free passive charge, but sometimes he doesn't. I'm not really too sure exactly when he doesn't do it, but I like putting him in the back just because there's a chance for it. He must need like a certain amount of distance to get there. So if some nerd wants to count that out, like let me know down in the comments below how many squares he needs to be away from someone. But just standard leveling or fast 8 for this. You can stabilize at level 7 or even level 6 with like Swain 2, Hui 2. And there are times where I just go an AP path where I focus on Hui and then use the other units more so in the late game, and then hit my late game a little bit later. There are times where I do build around Hui and I go kind of like an AP path. I go like Shojin, and if I don't get any more AP, sometimes I sell the Hui, put the Shojin on Varus. But let's say I do get like a Nashor's Tooth and I get like a Rabadon's Death Cap or a Morello Namicon, I just drop that all on Hui. And then in those cases, I don't focus as much on the Varus and Olaf, so I'm not like that thirsty to get them to 2-star. In those cases, you could kind of either level up or just not have a 1-star 4 cost with 3 items on them. And you can kind of use that to kind of go level 9, get a Diana, and hopefully win through that. It's also really good if you ever get Frosty Frontline. If I get Frosty Frontline, I go 7 Frost no matter what. And in those cases, sometimes you want to play around Hui instead of the Varus. Next comp up we have is going to be Pyro Varus. Pretty much same build as the one before, except you just go for 5 Pyro. This one also adds a bit of a mix of 4 Blaster. It doesn't really matter exactly what you do. Sometimes you could still combine the Pyro with the Frost, but if you're doing a pure Varus build, if you have like perfect Varus items, then I think 4 Blaster does a bit more, but it's pretty much the same build as we just saw. Next one up we have is Built Different. Just buy all the 4 costs, but the thing is with Built Different, if we go to stats and augments and then type in Built Different, it's 4.59 in Master Plus. Let's see what it is in Platinum. I'm not sure what the average rank of one of my viewers is, but in Platinum it's a 4.4. It's still solid. The average placement of every Platinum game is going to be 4.49. So this augment definitely is still takeable. It's not auto top 4 though. So I would say this is pretty balanced right now, but you just pick a 4 cost, you just slam items in the beginning and see who you kind of get, and then throw all your items on them. Nothing too crazy about that, just like a solid, decent augment. Molten Carabao Rumble, this is one of the hero augments that is a bit lower on the totem pole because it got nerfed a bit, but it's still pretty solid. You just do a Rumble plus Tristana build for Blaster and play as many Vanguards as you can. Just make sure before you go for this, since it is a bit lower on the totem pole, you either have a lot of Rumbles or you have absolutely perfect items for him. If not, there are probably better things to go for. Deja Vu Galio, same thing. You absolutely need Rageblade, Hextech Gunblade on Galio. Like no other build kind of complements it. No other build kind of activates this augment that much. So if you do get the chance to do Pandora's items after you get the Galio augment, definitely go ahead and do that. If not, Anger Issues is also really good in this comp. And yeah, you just find some main tank in the front. It's either going to be 3-star Rumble, 3-star Vex, or 3-star Mordekaiser, and then run 3 Mage. Very solid build. You also get to run Nami as a support unit, but yeah, just 2 cost reroll for this one. Multistriker Kalista. If you don't want to do the horizontal Kalista build, or if you get like press the attack early, but you don't want to go for like Ashe, Jax, or Kassadin reroll, going for Multistriker Kalista is pretty solid. You don't need the Rageblade. It's still an okay item. But you could kind of build anything on Kalista. I really just want like the Runons, maybe a red buff, kind of help her AoE things down a little bit. Because again, her ability hits multiple targets. There is a better build of Kalista out there, but if you get press the attack, it is worth going for this. After that, we have the B tiers, like Witchcraft, Fiora, Karma. Like I talked about this before. You only really want to go for this if you have 2 spatulas and go 8 Witchcraft. If not, it's kind of lackluster. But again, you need 2 emblems for that, which is a little hard to do. So just play the Flex Fiora Karma Gwen build. It's going to be a lot better. Multistriker Kassadin, sure, it's probably okay. I haven't seen too many of it, but there are probably worse things you can play. But if I were to 2-cost reroll, I'd probably just do like Kogmaw instead, or Ahri. There's not really too much of a reason to go for Kassadin. Unless you have like absolutely perfect items plus press the attack and a lot of Kassadins, like yeah, that's pretty much the only time I would do it. Eldritch Mages, yeah, probably skip Eldritch for now. 2 tanky blasters. Ezreal and Hui are just such jokes still. Like, yeah, you don't want to play that. Fast 9ing, very rarely will you get a game where you are able to get a good fast 9 going, but when it does happen, it feels really, really good. So just make sure you kind of recognize when that happens. Normally, if I get 2 econ things, that's going to be the time to go for it. So if I get econ portal, plus I get a huge win streak going, and I don't really need to roll on level 8, or if I get an econ portal and then also get a great econ augment, then yeah, you could go for fast 9. But apart from that, like, it's a little risky right now. Like, all the reroll comps kind of just hit you too hard, and you kind of stabilize at a weird time. But that's pretty much going to be it for the meta snapshot this week. I will be updating it again in the next patch. There's actually a huge change that's about to go on in TFT. Mortdog's calling it set 12.25. I actually think it's set 12.5 because it's a humongous amount of changes. So I am definitely looking forward to that a lot. So I'll be making a reaction video to it when the patch does come out, I believe on Tuesday, like the notes. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel below. It really helps me out a bunch, and you get notified whenever a new video comes out. And also, while you're playing TFT, head on over to bunnymuffins.lol/meta to get info on the best comps to play in TFT. Also, a lot of people have been wondering what data site I'm using. I'm using teamfight.lol, so if you are curious about data, there is like the Explorer option. It is in beta still, so there are some like UI errors or like weird things going on there, but hopefully they will be fixed soon. That's where I'm looking at a lot of stats. So hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.